Willkommen zum Between Worlds Podcast von Stefanie Krönke. Hier teilen wir Perspektiven aus den verschiedensten Welten für alle, die gerade zwischen den Welten wandeln. Persönlich, beruflich, organisatorisch. Und nicht wundern, auch manchmal wandern wir sprachlich zwischen den Welten. Der heutige Gast wurde auf Englisch interviewt. Viel Spaß bei dieser Folge. Welcome, Jan, to my podcast, Between Worlds. I'm still practicing the introduction, but let me try and give a little bit of an overview of who you are and how we've met, and then we can see where we're going to go from here, right? So Jan and me actually met in Cambridge. Jan is right now an assistant research professor at the Healthcare Improvement Studies Institute at Cambridge, and he's also, and this is actually where we met, a bi-fellow at Hughes Hall. So for everybody that hasn't been to Cambridge, it's maybe interesting to understand. It's kind of like Harry Potter. You go to Hogwarts and then you're also part of Gryffindor. So basically, Jan is at the University of Cambridge, does research in the medical field, but he's also part of Hughes Hall, which is basically his Gryffindor, which was also my Gryffindor when I was there. And that's how we met, through leadership training. And I've asked him to come on this podcast because I think he does really amazing work for the world. He really wants the world to be a better place. So he's a very purpose-driven person in his career. But he's also someone I think that can talk a lot about being in between worlds. So he's Dutch, living in the UK. I hope I am allowed to say that. His wife is German. They've just had a son. I think you've also spent some time in Canada, so you've seen lots of different cultures. You are kind of navigating a multicultural relationship. You've agreed to do this interview with me in English, not in German, but technically you could also speak German. So we have lots of interesting aspects to dive into, and I'm really, really happy that you're here today. So thanks so much for that.
Well, thanks so much for this lovely introduction, and I'm very glad we're doing this in English and not in German, which I don't think yet would live up to the requirements for this podcast.
Okay, but we have to say we did a couple of coaching sessions that were in German, right?
I listened in and nodded at the right times. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So apart, I think from my introduction, it would be interesting if you can just start us off to talk a little bit about yourself, what you've done, your career journey, so that we got a bit of a background, especially for people who are not in-depth medical research like you are, so that we understand a little bit more what you're doing. And then maybe also you can already start hinting at the first couple of topics that helped you in your career journey and the work we did together. And then we can start diving into some of the stories.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. I started off my academic pursuit in human movement sciences, or people working in the UK might know it as sport sciences. Did that in Amsterdam, finished that in 2008, and then wanted to contribute to the world in a different way. Did volunteer work in Kenya and did that for a period of about 9 months, hoping that I would get more clarity about what I wanted to do with my life. That didn't work out that way, of course.
Okay.
Was back in Amsterdam and had sort of this in-between period where I was not quite sure yet what to do next. Explored a huge range of different angles while doing basically my student job, but then full-time. Mm-hmm. And after speaking to a lot of different people, I ended up back on an academic trajectory, but now with a more purposeful feel around it. And did a PhD, more focused on rehabilitation sciences rather than on the sports and elite sports that I mainly was interested in throughout at least the first years of my studies. Did it in the north of the Netherlands, in a beautiful city called Groningen, and spent about 5 years. Yeah, no, really, really lovely. Definitely recommend people to also go there if they ever visit the Netherlands. And this is where I felt more close to doing something that bridged both my studies as well as something with a broader societal impact, or at least the idea of that. Mm-hmm. And it's been a fantastic opportunity in and of itself. It definitely helped me to learn myself, to get to know myself, to learn myself better throughout this period. And from there also allowed me, following my PhD, to do something I was very keen on at the time, which was working abroad, exploring worlds in a different way by working elsewhere. And that's where I then moved to the UK. And from the UK I was also able to do a range of other research projects in different countries, including indeed Canada, mostly there, even one in Japan, which was very exciting for a short period.
Nice.
And eventually now have made my return to the UK after having worked in Canada also for a short period, now in Cambridge. That's already over 6 years ago now, where I've really found my place in an area that is much broader than what I used to work in, at least in terms of research. So instead of this rehabilitation sciences and very specifically focused on exercise for people with spinal cord injury or wheelchair users, and I currently work in the Healthcare Improvement Studies Institute, so that's much, much broader. Like any area of healthcare is potentially part of what we focus on in our work, and I really feel that's the right place for me in terms of work at this moment, because it sort of relates to my broad interest in a lot of different areas, something that hopefully is broadly applicable, and building on the skills that I learned through this very more niche area that I did my PhD and those follow-up so-called postdoctoral research projects in.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. One question that just came to mind when I heard you talk, a question I get a lot in my coaching sessions or when people are like thinking about, onboarding with me is, and it's maybe some of it is also very German. So in Germany, we love linear career paths, right? Like you learn one thing and then you keep doing that thing and you just like move up the hierarchy. If I hear you talking about it, and I think you briefly mentioned that you went to Kenya and tried to like figure it all out and that didn't quite work out. So how linear would you say has your career been?
Well, if you look at the CV, it looks very linear. And did the right thing at the right time, and then the PhD, and then this postdoctoral research, and then this next thing. Yeah, the reality is obviously much, much, much more messy. There have definitely been moments where I didn't really know where it would be, what would be happening next, and if I would be successful in whatever next thing I had in mind. The problem was sometimes also I didn't know what I had in mind, and that was particularly frustrating. And those moments definitely have existed, especially in those transition times between one type of position and the next one.
Yeah. Okay. And what helped you during those times? Because often I get questions and people are like, oh, I feel I should have it all figured out, right? Like, and often when you tell the story later, it all sounds so great and it all worked out. But then in these moments of uncertainty, people are like, is life going to go on for me, right? And is it going to go in the right direction? So what would you say helped you overcome this? Or have you over time like developed certain things that help you now?
Yeah, no. First thing comes to mind, choose. Maybe this is specific for me, but I probably spend too much time trying to theorize about different options, and didn't actually dare to choose one.
Okay.
I'm probably doing myself a little bit short there because I did choose, but I was very much helped in those situations by talking to people with more experience, whether it's life experience, work experience, who then said, well, if you, for example, choose to go and focus on a PhD now, it probably will give you a range of really, really helpful skills. You'll be working in a meaningful area, and you will be able to apply those skills probably much more broadly than you currently think you will be able to do.
Yeah.
And it will definitely help you with building and also showcasing determination, perseverance to any future people, organizations you might want to be working for. Has definitely been very sensible advice. And it's not a call for just pick whatever, but you can trust that if you choose left or right or something in between, that all of those choices are probably none of them are going to be really bad ones. Probably all of them are good ones, with the caveat that you need to keep going back to like the values that are most important for you and expressing those within the.
Okay. It's actually a really interesting thing that you just said there at the end. Values. I remember we also spoke about this in the coaching program that you did with me, but it's something that I see a lot actually when I work with people that they're very focused on, okay, what position am I looking for? What should be the title, right? What's the next like logical progression in terms of the subject matter expertise that I have? And then I often have people who are like, I tell me they don't feel at home in the company or they don't get along with their boss. And often it's a values issue, right? So that they're just not aligned in what's important to them and what their values are. Could you say what's important to you or what your values are in when you make choices in the organizations that you want to work for?
No, it's ones that are really important to me are things around collaboration, connection, contribution. Those are absent. I don't think I would be able to feel at home.
Yeah. I think contribution and impact are important ones for you, right? From how I gotten to know you, like you
Yeah,
need to feel like this is going beyond you, and like you're really helping out in ways that, yeah,
yeah,
make a
yeah.
difference.
I've learned over time that that can be defined in a lot of different ways, and perhaps previously I had but maybe set ideas of what that then should look like.
Yeah,
We might touch on sort of this almost like this big hero complex or
yeah,
something.
we'll get into that.
But nonetheless, in itself, the intuition that I probably felt throughout, even when I was the students started to think a bit more around like, okay, what do I want to do in this world?
Yeah.
Um, I've always come back to that, and those are still present in the here and now.
Okay, nice, cool. And would you say that values like, for example, personal growth or continuous learning are important to you as well, or is that different from like what contribution means for you, or how do you
I mean,
interpret that?
there's for me they're so woven in that I don't always make them explicit.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
asking.
yeah, no, thank you for that. To be able to make a contribution, very defined. Yeah, you almost always need to have forms of personal and professional growth. If I would never pick up a book to read up on a topic, if I would not invest into professional relationships, there wouldn't be as much contribution as I would hope there could be. But when I look very carefully, it's probably as much as I enjoy the process of personal and professional growth. Um, if there wouldn't be one way or another, whether it's artificially created for myself in my own mind or really there, I don't think I would find the drive to then try to grow myself.
Okay, that makes sense. So for you, kind of contribution almost comes first, and then the other thing follows.
Yeah,
If
I
not,
would say so. Yeah.
okay, interesting. Yeah. I'm just bringing this up because I feel like for people listening, it's important to judge for themselves what they want. I think one reason, like for me, personal growth and contribution are two really big values as well, and that's probably where we connect well. But it's not for everyone, right? Like I've spoken to someone who said, like, really, I want to have a change of pace, but I don't want to learn completely new things, right? And then for that person, I would probably have to tell them, like, changing industry might not be the best thing for you because you might have to learn a lot of new things, right? Maybe it's more about finding a new employer or working in a different part of the country for the same type of like company or anything like this. And I think that's also fine, right? I feel like a lot of the times we also got to make sure that we don't take on values that are not our own just because they're on vogue or everybody seems to be going after them. And I feel like what you're mentioning with contribution and like self development, and maybe that we can get into that in a second, that can also get exhausting, right? That aspect of it, because you're constantly like pushing yourself and trying to like go over the edge, probably with the progress that you're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah. When you mentioned that, I was reminded of a very helpful framework, you could say, of human needs. Tony Robbins, a very famous coach, probably lots of people have different opinions about his approach, very high energy
Yeah.
type of person. But this
What, what's
framework,
this?
I
What's
have,
this Netflix documentary called again? I'm not your guru, right? I think for anybody who doesn't know him, like watch this. It's an interesting one to watch.
yeah, you could even watch your own reactions to it if you're upheld by it, if you're loving it, or somewhere in between, and then ask yourself, why is that? Even as
Yeah.
a prompt for reflection there. So the six things that I picked up from him over the framework was that we have a need that we could have a need for certainty,
Mm.
uncertainty, um, so lots of surprises and things. Significance, to feel important, to be seen as
Yeah.
important. And then other ones are around growth,
Hmm.
around love or connection,
Hmm.
so very broadly defined, or then contribution.
There's contribution.
And there is. And what I realized is that I wouldn't, if I had to pick two,
Hmm.
then sort of the love slash connection.
Yeah.
And that is very broadly defined. This is not about loving your
Yeah.
partner or your child. It's also about
Mm.
connection to nature. So it's he at least takes a very broad approach to that.
Yeah.
But that's one that's really just keeps coming back on in terms of who I am. And then
Yeah.
there's this contribution part that we spoke about.
Yeah.
And in this case, I'm not skipping on growth because I don't think it's important, but in of itself, it's one way or another. I see those things as like the other two are just that's what it should lead to.
Yeah.
But in your example of that person you mentioned, they might be indeed more in tune with perhaps, who knows, also maybe law of contribution, law of connection, sort
Yeah.
of being really well embedded with maybe within the organization that they are
Yeah.
working in, and being able to do something meaningful there,
Yeah.
but less so about this set of other skills. So I'm just mentioning
Or
that
certainty,
framework because
right?
we
Like
might
we
come back
Germans
to
love
it.
certainty. Or when I was working for Lufthansa, for example, like one big part of the company DNA was certainty, right? Because the most important thing is that the plane doesn't come down. So obviously safety and in some ways then certainty is like a really big important need in the company DNA. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
and there's no hierarchy of like one being better
Yeah.
than the other, or certainty. Sticking to certainty is not going to be helpful. It's more of like which one would you choose to really prioritize above anything else? And it
Yeah.
might be that certainty is a very great driver of contribution, for example.
Yeah.
But if it's certainty for the sake of it, then perhaps it doesn't feel inspiring and energizing over the long run.
Yeah. And it's often when you get to that point, right, when you have too much certainty that people are starting to think about career changes as well, or any kind of like potential growth. Yeah. So one thing I want to get into with you is a little bit like your own development journey. You already mentioned the hero complex. So you joined a program that I was teaching at Hughes Hall for like, I think PhD and postdocs it was at the time, right? Which was around like career orientation and like just building a lot of like skills to decide what you want to do next, maybe partly leadership skills, but a lot of that was just reorientation. Who are you? What's important to you and what you want to do with your career? Can you just give us like a little intro? What point were you at when we met, and what were maybe struggles or things that were kind of like weighing you down a little bit at that point in your life? And then we can get into some of these examples and things you've already hinted at.
No, it will be my pleasure. The reason why I joined the program, uh, actually was the first one was I was really curious and I really loved this kind of self-development stuff. So it was like, oh great, this is definitely for me. And then it was like, so what is the thing that I really want to bring into it? So it went in that sort of order. But definitely was something because I was already working at the Healthcare Improvement Studies Institute at the University of Cambridge for a
Yeah,
number of years and really enjoying it. So lots of other things, like I felt well connected to my colleagues. There was definitely a good sense of meaning within my work. But that sort of lingering voice somewhere saying it's actually not really good enough. It's actually not really impactful enough. Actually, you should move more out of your comfort zone because this
yeah.
thing is just it's kind of moderately impactful. But really, if you want to live up to your full capacity, you should be doing something much bigger.
Oh, I
And
remember, yeah, your full potential, right?
exactly, and I hope that people can hear that I'm saying this in a bit of a sarcastic undertone, if you will, because I'm sort of I was very serious about it at the time because I could see that that voice wasn't very um, helpful and rational.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't always want to believe it, but
Yeah.
sometimes I had those moments where I just did kind of. It didn't really make me feel then enthused or proud of the work I had been doing. I worked so hard on so many hours a week with
Yeah.
really good impacts with fantastic colleagues and really, there was really like stuff
Mm.
happening um, that we could and we are very, very proud of.
So
So then
essentially,
this,
like if I can just translate what you
yeah,
said
please do.
a little bit, it's like you had a very loud inner critic that constantly told you that you're not doing enough, that you're not good enough, that you're not making enough impact, that what you're working on isn't important enough. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
Exactly. And I could also, it was very clear, and this was one of the things that that sort of joined or that I brought into the program.
Yeah.
That voice became much louder at times of rest, as in like not, or actually maybe not working. So the
Mm-hmm.
moment I was really focused and really in my work, there wasn't enough space for that because all that energy was at that moment was going at least somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, a set structure, you really work hard through things, and then then it was maybe 6 or 7 p.m. and then you
Mm.
finish, or it was the weekend, and I didn't want to work all the time. I, of course, wanted to spend time with
Yeah.
family, friends, all of that. But then there was this nagging feeling of like, well, now, what are you doing now? Why are you not reading this book? Are you
Mm-hmm.
actually like in these other areas? Are you doing enough? Well, actually, not really. Like, and
Yeah.
then there was this constant, then bad, not constant, but at times this sort of struggle between is this now a good time to then just relax and lay back, or is my inner critic then going to tell me later, I need to
Yeah.
do double as much?
I remember you weren't very good at like resting and recovering, right? Like you were always like, yeah, spending your energy almost like to the last drop, almost in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and now I reflect perhaps back on that. It was kind of like I needed to show to myself that I was able to portray in all these levels of activity on all sorts of areas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And if I'd sort of met all my supposed criteria of activity, I
Yeah.
could have give myself somewhat of a break.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not necessarily of as much as I want to say, well, I was trying to generate some impact or contribution. It was more
Yeah.
about showing to myself, oh, at least I'm sustaining high levels of activity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically, and I think it's great that you're bringing this up because this is a perfect topic that I encounter in leadership coaching all the time, which is like you say, activity versus impact, right? Like an impact is closely related to results, like what's actually the outcome. And sometimes we do a lot, but do we actually achieve a lot? And that can be of any level, right? Like either doing something really great for the world, but it could also just be how well do I run my department or how well am I trying to like, get something done. And like you said, you were trying to get a certain level of activity to maybe finally feel like, okay, it's okay to rest now, but then you never really felt that way. And so it was just like a perpetuating cycle,
Yeah,
while sometimes not even evaluating if the outcomes you create are there or are the right ones. Yeah.
yeah. Let me say that at the same time, I wasn't. I'm feeling happy. Like it wasn't. I wasn't feeling down or. But it was one of those things that just keeps like. It's just. I either wish that
Harassing.
voice wasn't there, or I wish I knew how to address it so that
Yeah.
I could actually do something productive with it. And that's
Hmm.
something that I brought into the coaching program that you led.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then, so you said you brought this in. Um, do you still remember how we worked on this? and,
Hmm.
and has it changed now, or is it still the same? I guess is the question.
Excuse me. So would you like me to say something around like the activities that we've done with you, or a little bit that process, or more so much a little bit about my journey of engaging with the topic that we spoke about, that we just mentioned?
Maybe you can do a bit of both. Like, just give maybe one or two examples of how we worked on it, but then I think it's more about your journey and how it's shifted, because
Hmm.
I feel like that might be interesting for people to listen to. Because I'm pretty sure we have lots of leaders out there now who are like, but I cannot do less. I cannot do less, right? And this is like one of the biggest things I have. And when I work with leaders, I'm like, well, let's do less, so you have more time for strategic planning. And then usually they would tell me, well, I can't do less because there's so much on my plate. So I feel like to take someone through that journey of
Yeah.
what helped you and how you recalibrate it is helpful.
So two main components of the program or programs I've done with you, Stephanie. First one was a group-based coaching that was within the settings of Hughes Hall. Small group. I think we were five, if I remember correctly, five or six. We met weekly. You provided us with reflective exercises for us to work on in our own time, and then bring those back into the online calls that we had together. And you then sometimes did some short mini coaching with one of the people there, building on what they had prepared for that particular session. And that then also provided a good range of hooks for the others to either see something of themselves or to sort of bring something in. So that was the one part, and then later we followed on with one-to-one sessions to dig a bit deeper into some of the aspects that I had started to uncover, and very helpfully so, in the group-based coaching, but it probably needed a little bit more time and depth that wasn't possible within the group-based coaching.
This is always my thing that I'm torn between, right? Like sometimes it's really helpful to learn from others, but at the same time, sometimes you just need to dive into the individual situation.
And the other question you asked me, like, what has changed over time because of this? Excuse me. We already spoke briefly about I had the idea or this inner critic saying, what you're doing now is not good enough. Simple way of putting it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you here, right? But I think when I met you and you were first introduced to me, one of my friends in Cambridge said, "Oh, that this is this guy that just won an award about some really cool stuff on kind of like COVID and how it's impacting pregnant women, and he's like had some great breakthroughs, right?" So it's on paper, there was a lot of success, but yeah, okay.
And there was and there is, and I mean, I probably it's interesting. I'm probably more proud of it now than I was at the time.
Yes.
Um, but in the end, it doesn't matter how much external success there
Yeah.
was or wasn't. I mean, I was definitely working really hard, and I definitely was not ineffective of generating forms of impact. And there will be many people who are listening, whether in the corporate sector or otherwise, that are doing that as well at the moment, while also feeling like, oh, it could be better or it's not good enough, etc. So yeah, and one of the things where my brain focused on was the topic of environmental sustainability. I felt and I feel it's a really big area for our broader global society to address. Anyway, I don't think anyone would well, some people might disagree
Some
with
people
it, but
might disagree.
many people would agree that this is a global issue that
Yeah.
needs serious addressing, and that for current and future generations could have a very, very big impact. So I also feel like it's one of the big societal challenges of our time.
Yeah.
And my brain had focused on, well, I'm not doing anything on that area, and that's why
It's not enough.
it's not enough.
Yeah.
I'm aware that it could have picked more or less any area. It's an area that I definitely do feel strongly about and would love to see addressed as best as possible.
Yeah.
But it could have been any other in a way. Um, and I was like, came to you basically, or into this group-based coaching. I want to do more with that, but I also don't know how.
To make
And
it.
yeah, and I'm a bit stuck into feeling a bit sometimes not so great about myself when I think that I'm not doing anything on this area. So that's where it started. Um, and
In which, by the
yeah,
way, if
go
I
ahead.
dive in there for a second for people just listening to this, right? It also shows at the same time how strong some of your values have been, right? Like you even thinking about this, like shows how much contribution has always been important to you, right? And like you just wanted to maximize on that. So I think part of that drive is completely fine, but you might get into this in a second. I think the reason why this became a problem was that you had so much pressure on yourself to having to contribute in that field that sometimes you didn't even know where to start, and it was kind of paralyzing for you, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah. And that was the circle I was often going through. Maybe then having an idea, oh, maybe I could do this, whether it was inside or outside of work, and then maybe working on that or doing something on that for a few weeks, while also trying to keep up the rest of the activities that I was doing as part of my sort of normal daily regular job. And then after a few weeks, kind of, well, it's not meeting my high standards. I'll just, or maybe all often just it wasn't even a decision. It just kind of faded out again.
Yeah.
And then maybe sometime later, thinking, oh no, I didn't do that again. So it didn't give me a feeling of success about myself, which then reinforces dynamic of like, oh, actually, it's not quite good enough.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a particularly fruitful circle, if you will.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is this connected, because you mentioned this earlier to me, that on the one hand you were focused on these like very big topics, right? Like how can I contribute in terms of like environmental sustainability and what projects? And I think you were even thinking about like societal setups and how people should contribute and collaborate better, which you also said was one of your values. And at the same time, you had this, when you were in this kind of like negative cycle, sometimes you were also very focused on like, did I put enough things into my day? Or like, how did that affect your day to day, that kind of thinking?
You mean the combination of those
Yeah.
two things? Yeah, it was probably dissatisfying is the first word that comes to mind. Um, so those two specific things you mentioned. So the first one being this sort of high meta level thinking of what then the contribution in this area could look like, and this more the second sort of specific thing of like how do I sort of make sure that I keep doing the very specific particular things I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah.
I can comment on both of them. So the first one, it was almost so meta level that it's a much more bit of a theory based exercise rather than something that could lead to genuine action.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely a believer of like, strategy, sort of values first before you start to get into the concrete. But I realized only later, and definitely helped by the coaching and also how you sort of,
Yeah.
in a way, put up a mirror for me. Yeah, all of the energy going there without any forms of testing, trying something out, etc., is a way of avoiding actual action. Which was really funny because I was like, wow, I'm so contribution driven. How could I not undertake action? So I was like, I'm sure I'm actually needing this, but perhaps, and I pretty sure maybe I was very afraid of actually making steps in that direction to, am I going to actually then find out if I can make a contribution in that area, or whether, even more scary, do I really believe in that this is something that's truly
Yeah.
important, or will I find out that I'm maybe not as motivated for it as I would like to think that I should be? So that was that one part, and then the second part of this more trying to keep up the sort of the daily stuff. Yeah, that was definitely more of the dynamic of keeping up activity rather than impact, and also
Yeah.
feeling like that level of activity in my sort of daily work was something I needed to keep showing to myself. In a way, you could almost go that I'm worthy. I'm not as sure of that word completely. Like it's a form of like self-appreciation
Yeah.
that I would get, or maybe appreciation from others. That's maybe a better word. Through keeping up these levels of daily structures, activities, etc., that were part of my daily work.
So it's kind of like been about, yeah, you said worthy or proving that you're good enough or get some kind of confirmation at least that you're okay and you're doing well or something.
Yeah. If I use that framework of Tony Robbins, it was probably about significance.
Yeah.
And it wasn't some sort of like big ego thing, but somehow I did really crave sort of either seeing then the results of those very specific actions or hearing from somebody else on a job that I'd done, oh, well done, or even a
Wow.
thank you or anything along those lines. And
Yeah.
I kind of needed that, but I also felt I need to keep up my current levels of activity in order to
Mhm.
keep getting that level of,
Confirmation
um,
from people.
yeah, yeah, or from,
Yeah.
oh, sometimes it was also just from myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that because I feel like probably everybody can relate to that, that we all like to have some kind of external validation, right? And I think it's also fine that to some extent we need that. We're like social beings, we cannot exist on our own. So we need some kind of like environment and people that sometimes tell us, okay, well done, good job, and look at like how much progress you've made. And I think that's totally fine. The thing that I just want to point out from like, my coaching perspective here, because it might be interesting for people to listen, is I think what you were kind of stuck in and what a lot of people get stuck in, and I myself have been stuck in, is when some of these patterns become a cycle that keeps you stuck. And I feel like this is a little bit where you were, right? You had these great ambitions, but then part of you was afraid to act on them, either because some of them were too intangible and too big, but also because if you would start acting on them, I think I remember some of our conversations around this, and let's say they failed or they wouldn't yield as much progress that you'd hope, that would be again proof that you're not good enough, which is the exact thing you were trying to avoid. So that's when these cycles become inhibiting, right? And then you try something, you fail, you're like, oh great, now I know again that I'm not good enough, and then you dig yourself into like a super negative hole, maybe a hole with lots of activity. Some people like try to read lots of books, other people develop weird eating habits, others work out a lot and do lots of sports to like punish themselves and try and like shape themselves up. And I feel like this is a lot of where you were stuck in, and a lot of actually ambitious people are stuck in a lot. Like we do so many great things, but then every time just the fear of failure is like causing some of these negative spirals. It makes it so inhibiting to actually do the things we want to do and make the contribution I think that we want to make to society, the world, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like that, am I kind of hitting this a little bit in
Yeah,
terms of what
no,
you're
no,
saying?
no, certainly. Yeah, no, it's so there was one bit of like, well, if I indeed then spend even more time or energy on some sort of new idea, and
Yeah,
I'm reducing the outputs in the area where I would know that I am guaranteed to get appreciation from myself or from others. So that
yeah.
was an additional risk, and indeed this. You can listen to fantastic podcasts of very inspiring people who say, try lots, fall down, stand up again, fail a lot, and
Mhm.
very true, but yeah, almost like feeling like you're actively setting out to fail is not particularly inspiring. And
It hurts, right?
it's like you need, at least I needed a different starting point to be convinced of trying things out.
Yeah,
And I wasn't able to, well, no, I wasn't able. I struggled to bring it down to a level where it was just not overly ambitious, just something I could try out and go out
yeah,
and do. Not because it wouldn't be scary or riskful, but not on this like, oh, but if it's not this massive program of work that I've thought through all the way with
yeah.
all sorts of, fantastic things already attached to it, then it's not worthwhile starting with.
Hmm.
That was
And
the narrative.
yeah, that was.
I had started to believe. So what I do differently now is I don't I don't believe that narrative anymore, or at least I don't believe it all the time anymore, which gives good windows of opportunity to then act on it. So for context, I think we always have times when, whether it's maybe we're more tired or something else happens, where
Yeah.
maybe this old inner voice, if you will, or inner critic comes up and sort of
Mm.
can be very loud, even to the extent where you might even almost start to believe it again.
Yeah.
Um, you might, after a night of rest, realize, actually, I don't have to believe that
How many nights of rest are you getting these days?
well, enough, with many thanks to my absolutely brilliant wife who is able to um, help us so much get through the night. So I'm trying to contribute as well. But just big heads down for all the women out there taking care of babies. It's really fantastic. Um,
Thanks for that, Jan. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
yeah, no, of course, of course. But I'm mostly now. So you've asked me what has changed now,
Yeah.
and one thing, for example, that I started to work towards was realizing I can do something within my current role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Actually, quite a lot. So I started to, through reflection,
Mm.
started to maybe be ready enough to start trying out something else, something that's actually is manageable within my current context. It's still,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a good level of ambition within it, and it also could fit within my current work role
Mm-hmm.
because it meant I don't need to do it necessarily outside of my already fairly
Yeah.
stretched schedule, and I would actually be connecting it to the areas and the networks that I'm currently part of, and there are, of course, they have a lot of leverage.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things I did in the end was think of a range of projects and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I presented those also to those senior within the institute that I work in, and asked if this is something that I could start to build a bit of a portfolio on.
Yeah.
And I was definitely met with support and suggestions of how to further refine that idea. And where I'm
Mm-hmm.
currently at is it's still a modest part of my current portfolio of work, but it's growing, and
Yeah.
I'm finding fantastic ways in and able to indeed use those networks and
Mm-hmm.
relationships that exist here. And it's starting to feel much more within reach to do something real within this area, as modest as it might seem in the eyes of my inner critic.
Okay. And what you're doing in your current, because you're basically like in healthcare, right, and researching in the medical field, but what you're doing now is something which has something to do with environmental sustainability in your field, right? This is
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
it's one of the things. So I have
Mm.
within this sort of broader portfolio of research that I
Yeah.
have, for example, which can be about maternity care,
Mm.
as one example, but there are also other areas that we focus on at the institute I work at, and one of them that I'm trying to sort of increase as a area of research,
Mm-hmm.
partly because there's not enough on it, in my view, and uh, there's a growing need for it.
Yeah.
That's the piece I'm sort of trying to tackle now. But then again, doing the thing that I would have learned to do, you need to make it
Mm-hmm.
very specific on a particular area. It doesn't mean you can't address a very big challenge, but you need to bring it down to something fairly specific, which I'm
Yeah.
over time and by talking to more people, it's develop ideas as any entrepreneur would also do. You get to something which you can do in the here and now, and that has a particular timeline to it, etc.
Okay. It's very nice to like hear you talk about that transition, right? Because um, basically you've combined like a big vision with like iteratively working your way towards that, right? To say like, okay, what resources do I have? Where am I right now? And how can I get started? And I mean, even there, maybe you're almost selling yourself a little bit short, right? Because if I remember some of our discussions when you were kickstarting some of these things, you had to convince people internally that's even something that you were allowed to spend any time on and potentially money on, right? And like to just build something that hasn't been there from and form it from scratch almost, or like from very little and start growing it needs a lot of courage and needs a lot of vulnerability as well, right? Like there was a lot
Hmm.
of risk in the beginning that people would have said no and said like, no, we don't want you to like spend your time on that.
Yeah, no, actually, that's, thanks for that. And it's why I'm proud of it is because it's I feel that this is maybe something that I've took initiative on myself, and with many of the other areas of work, and I
Mm.
might be doing myself a bit short, but there were definitely already existing programs of work with ideas of really, really brilliant professors with a whole range of big group behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've And I definitely would recommend this for others who are in similar positions to definitely chip into that. Like if you try to do something, at least within research, a bit too early by yourself, might work, but it might also be a very lonely journey. So learning lots of skills, ideas,
Yeah.
um, of others and shaping those up, which I've probably done much more than I might give myself credit for, that I was able to see at the time.
Yeah.
Huge opportunities there. But nonetheless, now that I'm in a position where I can also take more initiative informed by experience and skills that I've built up over the last couple of decades, yeah, it feels like a different thing. But it's not because the topic is so much more impactful than the other ones. It just feels because it's a different starting point within myself.
And okay, so what is the different starting point in like?
Um, I have thought of an area or I've identified something was like there is a real need there.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that fits within the program of work that we currently work on at the
Yeah.
Healthcare Improvement Studies Institute. But I don't think anyone else at the moment is choosing or picking up that specific area.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think about that myself and then come up with a range of proposals and then
Yeah.
see how, the other very brilliant minds look upon that in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the relevance of and the robustness of what I am proposing.
Yeah.
But it felt in probably a more simple way. It probably feels more something that came from myself rather
Mm-hmm.
than something that came from others and was handed
Okay.
to me.
And that's like what is like the different starting point for you to say like, okay, I took this from nothing, I identified it, I start building it, and like now I can be really proud that that's developing momentum.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, pretty cool. From big visions and not getting any action to like actually getting something like this off the ground, which maybe without you wouldn't have gotten off the ground, right?
I think so. I mean, there are definitely these moments of, you could call them tipping points, where suddenly things come together, whether it's internally or maybe it's just right conversation at the right time, and then suddenly or maybe you, in the world of research, you might win a small grant so that you have a bit more time to actually spend some time on working up the idea. I mean, those are
Yeah.
incredibly helpful external bits,
Mm-hmm.
but the internal bits leading to that are, yeah, it's sort of an iterative process that does require a leap of faith.
Yeah.
um, and hard work to then be able to make use of moments that you could call a tipping point.
Yeah. Really cool. And I think it's really nice just to like bring in the personal development perspective here is that you mentioned your inner critic and like not thinking that you were good enough. And I feel like the fact that you took that leap of faith is also testimony to how well you got your inner critic under control, right? Because if you weren't able to like, you probably would have never exposed yourself to that kind of risk and taken that leap of faith. So I feel like when you sometimes you work a lot on the inside and you get better at like, nicer, kinder words to yourself. But in the end, you've also translated this into actual external results and
Yeah,
things that you took on. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The leap of faith comes in where you nobody can forecast, say with certainty if and when you would see the results that you might be hoping for through those efforts.
Yeah.
Um, I maybe was blessed with the idea that those efforts through coaching, self-reflection, and a range of similar things were going to be one way or another worthwhile.
Yeah.
There was enough and that belief was stronger than that of my inner critic, or the voice of my
That's
inner
good.
critic.
Yeah. And maybe it's also a nice aspect because I think when we started working together, you had no idea how this would actually translate into anything tangible, right? Like we did a lot of inner work. I remember you really like inner meditations and
Mm,
getting your inner critic under control and all of these things. And this is what I sometimes say to people during coaching. I've seen people do the inner work and then months or sometimes years later, they turn out to be the foundation of a lot of like really courageous life changes that they've done. I remember one lady, I think she was very unhappy with her career for many years, and now she works with the UN in Kenya, and like, you know, all of a sudden these like leaps happen, or these changes happen because you've worked on yourself and you've asked yourself, what do I want, what's important to me, and how do I
Yeah.
get all my negative voices inside of me in order, to then be able to do that. Especially, I think, if you're someone who, I know nowadays not everybody loves to talk about this, but if you're a purpose-driven person that's kind of looking for the why in life, it seems like it's a good foundation to work off from.
Yeah, no, and one example of things coming together based on
Mm.
efforts, inner work, you could say, done earlier, is so our son is now 6 months old. So our
Yeah.
first child, so becoming parents, and a lot of the things that I need at this time,
Mm-hmm.
being more okay with things being not so perfect, um, being more okay with appropriately delegating things rather than doing things myself, for example.
Mm.
I'm much better able to apply them when I'm in most need of them.
Okay.
And that was probably a trajectory which I think through experience one gets better at that anyway. Not everyone,
Mm.
but I think you don't necessarily need like deep self-reflection to make some advances there. But some of the keys do lie in there in terms of when it comes to perfectionism or delegating, like why does somebody has that drive to be perfectionistic or struggle to delegate something?
Yeah.
Well, in my case, if I look back, perhaps there was an element of wanting to show my own significance, using this word of Tony Robbins again,
Yeah.
through doing these kind of things. And we spoke about sort of getting self-appreciation or
Mm.
appreciation from others. And that gets in the way of getting something actually done, or at least getting it done efficiently.
Yeah.
Um, giving yourself half an hour and
Mm-hmm.
just hammering it out and then saying, well, after half an hour it needs to go out. There's no other way. Or
Yeah.
indeed, guiding others to maybe pick it up. And I guess I'm referring to these examples because with the with now also really wanted to make sure that I have enough time with my family, the
Mm.
need for applying that was like triple as high now suddenly. And I am finding I am that I've gotten now. I'm much better at doing it than I
Mm.
perhaps expected I would be able to
Yeah.
before the birth of our son. And that was very
Even today
interesting.
you told
And
me you have to finish by 5 p.m., right? So you can get out of the office.
it's also very true. And but it's so rewarding to see that all those pieces
Hmm.
they can come together at this time now.
Yeah,
Um, Very rewarding. Very
very nice.
hopefully suggesting to others to take that leap of faith, and also the time where a bit like sitting there by yourself doing the self-reflective exercise,
Mm.
thinking, oh, I could also be doing something which feels more fun in the here and now, or I could do something at work that might just generate the kind
Yeah,
of appreciation that I really like getting, or the extra
yeah.
bonus or the other thing. Maybe in the short run, but in the long run, you might miss out on something that you otherwise wouldn't even know that existed.
Okay. So would you say that right now you have more brought these two things together, the external appreciation at work, but also that inner, I don't know, would you call it contentment or fulfillment, that you're heading in the right direction, or how would you describe this?
Well, I'm definitely heading in the right direction.
Okay.
I mean, the art of fulfillment is one is probably a lifetime journey. But
Yeah.
compared to when we first met and
Mm.
started the coaching program with you, I definitely feel more of a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And okay, one part, of course, a massive personal change, of course, is now being a father.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely adds to it, but it's not limited to that. I also feel more fulfillment, and also before the birth of our son, and
Yeah.
of around the things I do within my work because of this feeling of like I'm getting a grip on something that I didn't feel I had much of a grip on,
Yeah.
and I am able to not just rationally like make a list that is a, let's call it the things I'm proud of list or gratitude
Mhm.
list. And by the way, I'm not mocking this. I think these are incredibly
Yeah.
important, but I sometimes notice they were more on a rational level and not
Yeah.
necessarily translating into like actually
Feeling.
feeling it. And yeah, this is something I have more now, both within the time I have with my family, as
Yeah.
well as suddenly feeling this sense of perhaps fulfillment
Hmm.
through a conversation I'm having at work.
Hmm.
And probably better able to identify those moments,
Yeah.
and then also at the end of the day being like, oh, actually, oh, not bad.
Yeah. You get to appreciate them here and now more and like appreciate yourself in the moment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really, really nice. Awesome. Cool. Um, I think like we covered a lot of these different things. One thing I think to like maybe close it off, that would be interesting to hear from you because we obviously call this the Between Worlds podcast. And my feeling is like you have looked into so many different worlds. In some ways, you're bringing in a new world of like environmental sustainability in your existing work environment as well. And that's my feedback to you. I feel like you've always been a very humble person, maybe also because you've seen so many different things. So what are your kind of like learnings from going between the worlds, maybe culturally in your personal relationships, but also work-wise? What are learnings you have drawn from being exposed to different types of environments, and how was that helpful to you?
Well, one personal lesson is that I can really see how building bridges between people is something that really is very close to my heart. And
Mm-hmm.
that in one way or another, I've tried to do in the different places that I've worked or lived. But it was probably also a reason why I wanted to go abroad and see those different living worlds, and whether whether realistic or not, bring them a bit closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a personal lesson I drew. And the other one is if it's possible to bring together people in the right way, with the right level of facilitation, it's really mind blowing what the complementary perspectives can bring.
Mm-hmm.
And also how hard it is to listen to each other,
Yeah.
definitely including myself. But by working, living, being part of sort of these between worlds, you start to see like, wow, like there are just so vastly different ways of looking at the same topic or the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more difficult for me to hold on rigidly to my original idea when you just have these other very nice, very intelligent people who are like clearly have a very different view on this, and where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's much harder to dig oneself in then.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like, I mean, you said you've been in Cambridge now for 6 years, so, some of this might also become normal. But since I've moved back to Germany, I've realized how much Cambridge is also a special place of being really good at, like, bringing people from different worlds together and, making that a win-win situation and making people learn from each other. I feel like it starts with little things like, when you have formal events, right, it's very clear that you can turn up in black tie, but you can also turn up in your cultural kind of black tie equivalent. And that is just very accepted and encouraged. I feel like every time, and this is something I'm noticing in Germany now, you're invited to dinners, like they'll always ask for your dietary requirements, right? And it's completely normal that you'll have vegan and halal food and gluten-free food. And like, it's also like, I feel like a place that loves to bring worlds together and just says like, let's build the right basis to enrich each other with our perspectives. And I think it's great that you get to do research in a place like this where I think it's challenging. You've got to be ready to let people in who are very different from you and who bring perspectives that you might have never considered. But I think at the same time, they can be a great fuel for innovation.
Yeah, and what you're saying is, at least on my end, a very helpful call for action as well as to how to make sure that things that might work within very, very broadly defined Cambridge ecosphere could also work elsewhere. And that's definitely something I feel strongly about. Like, what are ways, methods, approaches, etc. And they don't all have to be rational. It can be on any other level.
Yeah.
That can work in a large range of different places to build bridges between people. And it sounds a bit maybe high flying, but being able to enable a good conversation between neighbors can be absolutely importantly changing to many things that happen around us.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And it's also at the same time, I think, a really important reminder, right? That sometimes taking the time to really understand different perspectives is something that brings people closer together. Brings us back to Tony Robbins with love and connection, right? Which is what we're all looking for. And if we let other worlds in, I think it's a better way to connect rather than trying to make that distance because we have any differences that we've identified. Yeah. And at the same time, we're all the same, right? A lot of the patterns that we spoke about in terms of inner critic and getting stuck, I think are very universal to any human being on this planet.
Based on my very superficial snapshot of working in Netherlands, Canada, Japan, the UK, you do realize, there are definitely very different ways how that's expressed and what people might the specific things that they might struggle with or seemingly struggle with. But some of those deeper dynamics, especially within the work worlds that I was part of, they're not that different.
Okay. I feel like this is a perfect ending statement. So thank you for that. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming on. As a new dad who probably is pressed for time and has lots of other things on his mind.
Absolute pleasure. And it was great to be able to talk about the importance of coaching and self-reflection. I think it's something I would highly recommend to anyone. And it can really happen in short bouts of time. You don't need necessarily step into useful group-based coaching in order to start making some headway with it. And you can do those things to find out if asking yourself some nice, sometimes some challenging questions is maybe actually going to be fruitful rather than continuing on the path that you're familiar with.
Yeah, really nice. Cool. Thank you so much. And then let's see how this airs and how everybody's gonna.
Thanks again.
Schön, dass du bei der heutigen Folge von Between Worlds dabei warst. Ich hoffe, sie hat dir gefallen und etwas in dir bewegt. Wenn du Erkenntnisse oder Erfahrungen aus der heutigen Episode teilen möchtest, schreib mir gerne auf LinkedIn dazu. Ich freue mich immer zu hören, was bei dir angekommen ist. Eine Bewertung und ein Abo helfen natürlich dabei, dass noch mehr Menschen Between Worlds finden können. Also schon mal vielen Dank dafür. Wenn du bei den Themen, die du hier im Podcast entdeckst, tiefer gehen möchtest oder Unterstützung suchst, um bestimmte Dinge in deinem Leben, deiner Karriere oder deiner Organisation umzusetzen, dann melde dich gerne direkt bei mir. Meine Kontaktdaten findest du auf meiner LinkedIn-Seite oder hier in den Shownotes. Bis zur nächsten Folge.